Welcome. Can you all see me? Wonderful. And I'm presuming you can hear me also then. So I'm experimenting with with a feature of the computer that I haven't known existed. So I'm hoping that the picture quality to me does not seem that good. However, we're still, it's actually a minute after 6. So for those of you who are viewing excuse me, I'm checking my screen here. For those of you I haven't met before, my name is Terry McGill. I live in Portland, Oregon, where it's wet. um, and while they have snowstorms and avalanches in California, um, we're only wet here. And I say that, I start this way because we're in relationship with everything. It doesn't matter if you're in Oregon, Washington, California, Arizona, Berlin, Saskatchewan, anywhere around the world. We're in relationship not only to ourselves, but everything. The the ancient sage Lao Tzu, who wrote the Tao Te Ching, uh, that was so difficult. Still is difficult for me to understand, but at the very beginning, it's like that did not make any sense at all. And after some years of studying with a Chinese grandmaster who had studied copies that I can't even obtain and couldn't read anyway because they're in a different language, but I began to have some glimmers. And then fortunately, I met Dr. Rulin Shu, the quantum physicist and string theorist. I didn't even know what a string theorist was, and I only know the words for quantum physicist. But she began to share that everything is, and this is one of the teachings that she and Dr. and Master Zhigong Sha have brought to us. Everything is made of Shen, Qi, and Jing. Shen, in this philosophy, uh, is spirit or information in scientific terms, heart or receiver, and mind or consciousness. So that's Shen. That's a handful right there. Qi is relatively simple, we think. I used to believe that I knew what energy meant, but it means so much more. There are levels of energy. At certain levels, it becomes pure light, and it's almost indetectable anyway. And finally, we get to matter. The combination of energy and matter are our physical body. And I'd like for you to just sit there and ponder for a moment. Have you ever been in a relationship where you thought you understood what the other person was saying, and it turned out that you were absolutely incorrect? And I'll just share that I have been there most of my life with many people. So started in school. So it wasn't my fault, it was the teacher's fault. So it's really not our fault, because when a child is born, they're literally a sponge, an information sponge. They come out of the womb. I was cesarean. Most people come out a different way. However you are born, we don't know how to exist if we don't have that umbilical cord. And even if we do have it, there are challenges. So the biggest relationship challenge, I'm going to bring up a slideshow that I've listened and felt and tried to put it into words, and it'll be recorded. It's being recorded right now. you've signed up, so you'll receive a copy, because Zoom needs your email address to give you the connection to come on and watch this. And so we use that email address and we send you the copy of this. And I'm saying it that way because I've been pondering this subject for years, and this is the latest iteration. And I'm still looking at the slides and going, well, should I tweak that word? Is that really the best word? And, we never know, because I'm not inside your mind. I don't have your awareness. So with all of those caveats, let's look at the slideshow. Pause for a moment, or allow me to pause for a moment, because I'm not sure. I came on a different way, and I believe I have to go off and restart because this is not allowing me to show the show. My apologies. I invite you to, because your view should be uninterrupted, well, at least your view of the screen. What I'd like for you to do is close your eyes if you're comfortable, not if you're driving, of course, and ask yourself to, or rather ask your subconscious to give you two and only two awarenesses, remembrances of a relationship that was medium unpleasant. Not anything that's going to upset you. The purpose is to bring something up that you've been carrying in the subconscious. And then we're going to do, over the next 50 minutes or so, a magician's trick. Not really, but it seems like it when we're working with the unconscious. All right, so I'm going to go log in my usual way. There, you should be able to hear me now. This is more the usual screen. And, oops, tilted it the wrong way. So now let me go back out and line up my slideshow so that I can share screen. And there it is. And you will see it in about 4, 3, 2, 1. And there it is for me. And yeah, I clicked the wrong button. My mistake. We'll do this again. There we are. So, well, I started off by taking you literally around the world in your imagination and talking about everything but ourselves until the very end. The whole topic of tonight is self-love. And you may wonder, and I'll allow you to wonder for a while, I guess, what does it mean to empower ourselves? So we empower ourselves. You may have heard the Christian term that a house built upon the sand. Can't remember the rest of the quote, But you know what happens when sand shifts and you have a house built on it? The house begins to creak, groan, lean, may fall over. So self-love is our foundation. There have been times in my life when I creaked and groaned and moaned and fell over relationally. All relationships reflect our own inner comfort with ourselves. And we can only connect with others or give from who and what we are at that moment. And the only way to change that is to, more self-love changes everything. I always find that many speakers start talking about a term and never define it. And then I make up my own terms, which usually are not in alignment with theirs. So I want to share these with you for you to reflect upon. Number one, self-love is honesty with kindness, compassion. It's for ourselves. So the focus of tonight is deep within. It's our subconscious, almost all of it. We have to have respect, or rather we have to develop, most of us, respect for our own heart. If our parents didn't teach it, didn't know how, we're too busy, then we have to learn it, maybe from step one. My wife and I enrolled our young child at 5 years old in pre-kindergarten. It wasn't kindergarten yet, but it was at the Waldorf school. They're called the Steiner schools in Europe and other places around the world in the United States, the Waldorf schools. The teachers there are trained better than most parents. And our son told me one day when he was about 30, and I said something about how kind he was. And he said, yeah, I got that in the Waldorf school. I was so pleased. So the third aspect of self-love I'd like for you to consider is awareness, and you can see what without. I don't know about you, and I'm not going to even say anything about you, but I still judge, and I've been trying to stop judgment for decades. We don't respect ourselves enough, that's my belief, if we judge ourselves. So that's a goal. It's called an aspirational goal. I want to get there someday. And so we have to have patience. And it's, it all begins inside. It's patience with who? With me. There's a native term called for that. It's called Waitash. Waitash is me. And I have to have patience. Waitash needs patience. If we're not aware, well, let me not jump ahead. I want to share with you something that I've recently become aware of that I didn't believe, because I'd heard all my life that, most people are about 5% conscious. Well, I had a different understanding of consciousness at that time. But what Dr. and Master Qigong Sha noticed in some things that he was reading was that the conscious mind creates about 10% of what we experience in life. And we're not a victim. But 90% of what is in our lives is created by our subconscious. So what's in there? You can call them old programs, negative information, bad karma, a lot of terms. But what's important is to realize, or at least reflect upon and wonder about, I can only affect 10% of my life? Maybe that would explain a couple of things. So, jumping back to self-judgment, what can we do about judgment? Number one, what is our self-talk like? What are we saying when we don't even notice it? I use a lot of the time until I started focusing on this and doing exercises. I didn't even hear myself. It was there. And the harsh inner talk was not just about myself, because I didn't believe I could do anything about what was in my unconscious, so I blamed everything on other people. It was their fault. I felt like a puppet, like, something was pulling my strings, and if it happened to be the person over there who said a word and I jerked because of that word, feeling it was directed at me, then I felt that they were the puppet master. And those poor people that I thought bad thoughts about and yelled at sometimes, they were innocent because it was what was inside of me. My misinterpretation. Imagine a 2-year-old sitting on a floor in front of a wood stove in the 1950s. And the man of the house comes in, storming outside, had a flat tire on the way home, nobody to hold the umbrella while he changed it. And wet, grumpy, he came in, stepped on the cat's tail, and yelled at the cat, slammed the door. And the 2-year-old on the floor thought, what have I done? Because what does a 2-year-old know? The first 6 years of our life were a sponge. That's generally considered to be truth by the experts in different fields. I've read different descriptions of how that occurs and why that happens. And then we wind up later on going into therapy or something else, hitting the self-help books. So self-love is learning how to be aware and understand that healing is a process, that growth takes time, and that gentle progress is best because with the subconscious, it's trial and error a lot of the time. We don't know what the wiring is like, and we're reaching into the dark. Fortunately, there's some wonderful books out there and some wonderful teachers that are more rare. And depending on one's age, I am still so grateful that my wife discovered the Waldorf School when our son was about 3 years old. She had already been searching. And she said, would you like to come for, I forget what she called it now and what they called it, but you go in and you observe. And boy, do they teach differently than the public schools. Wow. Anyway, back on topic here. Self-love, Here's one thing if you write anything down. Healing is a process that takes time. Healing from misconceptions and time. The philosophers can say there's no time and space, but we're living still in a place where we live our lives by the clock, and we emotionally live our lives by the pain to some degree or another. You might call it by a different name. So self-love grows or transforms best in safety, because if we're guarded, physiologically we're shut down. We are not open to transforming anything inside if we have to protect ourselves or believe we do from what's outside. And sometimes it's very real. So again, healing is a slow process. Gently, steadily. And we can only take in and begin to comprehend one insight at a time. When I was a realtor, I juggled so many balls. I multitasked on one hand and had three on the other hand, all going at the same time. And I was not a happy person, because we can't, well, I didn't even know much about self-love at that time. So self-love grows in safety. Related to this, but this is a completely different topic, right? Everything has a field. The first that I have read about a field was a philosopher in 1730. I mean, that's almost 300 years ago, right? And he became consciously in belief that there must be some kind of a field creating the effects that he saw in the world. After the ability to use electricity to generate and use it, we didn't invent electricity. I had an electrical engineer at a power plant tell me that. Like, what do you mean? We don't know what it is and how it works. We just know how to make it and use it. Imagine an engineer with a PhD talking like that. Stunned me. So electricity has a field, and that was discovered as soon as humankind began to understand, at least the ones that we know, begin to understand, to generate and look at the properties of electricity. I remember an experiment that I did when I was pretty young. You take a nail, a big nail, and you get about 3 feet of copper wire. And back then we had those tall, round dry cell batteries with little screw things at the top, two posts, one negative, one positive. And so you take the wire and you wrap it around one of the posts and screw it down so it's tight. And then you step back about a foot and you begin to wind that wire around that big nail until you're down to about a foot. And then you wrap the other end of the wire around the other post on the battery and screw it down tight. So you've got two good connections there. Now that nail will pick up anything that's iron, not copper, not aluminum, but it's become a magnet. And technically, it's an electromagnet because it's electricity that is making that, it's magnetizing, it's creating a field by the field of the electricity that runs through the wire. And so then the nail becomes a field and it becomes a magnet. So thoughts also have fields. Emotions have fields. And yeah, I know some of you know that. You walk into a certain room, and it's like, oh, I'm going to go into a different room because that one does not feel good because somebody is upset. The heart also has a field. That's something I learned about almost 30 years ago, I think, now. I didn't believe it at the time. The Heart Math Institute and I forget his name, Dr. Roland something or other. Um, he and his wife, and they've assembled a team. What they said back then and published was that the heart has a field hundreds of times larger than the brain. And it went, that's baloney. But then I was so curious about it because it had been published in a scientific magazine and they have a screening process. And so I did some more searching, and over a few years, it's like, wow, the heart really does have an electrical field. The mind has an electrical field, but the mind's is not as big as the heart. Not only that, but there are people who have increased the electrical field of their heart with exercises. And so later in my life, excuse me a second. So later in my life, I started looking for the people who knew those exercises or knew how to teach them. Martial artists. That was what surprised me. And it wasn't about fighting because martial arts began before the fighting part of it was developed. But we won't go any further off field. So everything has a field. An iron nail becomes an electromagnet because of the field of electricity going through a wire. I mean, that's just for me back then. I was a kid. That was magic. Yeah. It's it's deeper magic. It's quantum magic. It's uber magic. Pick your term. That our thoughts have a field. Our emotions have our field. Our heart has a field. Now, the good news is we can reduce the size, the effect of the field of our emotions by working with our heart. And we'll do that in a bit. Now, one of the ways, and I think most of you know it, I sure hope my computer hasn't stopped working. No, there it is. Good. So we become what we chant because sound carries frequency. And you might think of sound as similar to electricity going through not a wire, but our voice box or the string of a musical instrument. I used to play the violin, so I'm very familiar with the vibrations. So sound carries frequency. Remember that we have a field, not just our thoughts, not just our emotions, every cell. So sound carries frequency, and frequency shapes our field. That's some of you may know. It's evidently really well known. I've seen references a lot of places by real scientists that the songs that Brahms wrote have an effect on us, much different from, slightly different from what Mozart wrote, and much different from, for example, the marching songs. Sousa, John Philip Sousa, I was trying to remember his name. So frequency shapes our field. Sound, the sounds that we choose, and repetition. Repetition will rewrite the patterns. There was a reference to this in an earlier slide. We change our patterns if we repeat certain sounds enough. And we're almost at where I'm going to invite you to join me in doing that. We'll use the sound Da, which means greatest, and I, which means love. So I have a Tao calligraphy, Da I, I'll bring up here in a moment. Tao calligraphy, all calligraphy has the power to carry source. That's an ancient saying, but hardly anyone knew how to do it. So Tao calligraphy carries source frequency. Da I is greatest love. A subset of greatest love is self-love, because greatest means all love. And so there's a portion of that that's ours. Like, that's me. Why touch? Da I. Would you like to resonate? Just wonder about this. What if you could resonate at some degree of the field of greatest love? And the good news is, when we do this exercise, when we do this practice, whatever terms you want to call it, when we chant or sing, we receive far beyond human effort. So the way we do it is to chant from the heart. Now, another way to say that is, we do not want to chant from the head, because it will sound and feel completely different. I know I came from living in my head, and it was quite a journey to move out of there to the extent that I have. So we want to chant from the heart. That means feeling. That means not thinking. When we chant from the heart, we're allowing sound to move our energy. And the way it moves it and how it moves it will depend on the mantra or the sound that we use. So if we play a marching band on the whatever kind of a player you have versus a Brahms or Mozart, we're going to have a completely different experience. So what I want to invite you to do, oops, wrong slide, is this is a Da I calligraphy card. And I wanted to be ethical. So you're looking at one of my cards that I purchased. So it's mine. I didn't want to take one off the web because that's not ethical, or it may not be. I didn't want to risk that. So this is mine, and I'm willingly sharing it with you. And what you see in the background is my carpet. If you're wondering what's that behind it, because I put it in a place where I had good lighting. I tried 3 times to get this. So the top part here, if you don't know it, I know most of you do, that top, that L shape, that's Da, greatest. And then there's a connection right here that connects the greatest and the love. And this is a symbol for love, I, in Mandarin. And in Chinese writing, there's like 13 different movements here, but they're all joined together because this is called ibizi, one stroke writing. And this little joining mark right here joins them together and makes both of them into one stroke. The sound is Da, I, and there are many different ways to do it. I invite you to listen silently to me, and then just listen for a while. And you might experiment looking at the calligraphy and then closing your eyes and listening, and maybe ignoring listening and feel without listening. however you want to experiment, because this is all about experiences. Da, I, da, I, da, I, da, I, da, I. Now I invite you, if you'd like, to join me. Please don't unmute, um, and chant as loudly or softly as you want, and feel. Notice are there parts of your body that are vibrating? I already noticed it. So now please notice. Da, I, da, I, da, I, da, I, da, I. There are also tunes to sing it. That's easier for me. Um, da, I, da, I, die, 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 die. If you're tracing it, some of you know how to trace it. I would ask you not to trace it at this time, but to focus, and it's so that you may focus more on the experience of sound alone, because we have to use our mind to guide our hand. It doesn't happen automatically. That's my experience. I always like to preface that. That might not be your experience, but I'd like for you to have the experience of just sound. If we isolate different techniques, we may be able to experience one aspect of it more purely. So just sound. And I invite you to close your eyes now. Da, I, da, I, da, I, da, I. Da, da, I've just closed the PowerPoint slide. So you wouldn't have noticed that if your eyes were closed. So I thought I would tell you if your eyes are still closed. What I'd like to do now is ask you to feel. What does it feel like when you're only chanting? If you're doing it yourself, or if you were listening to me and not chanting, or third, if you were chanting along with me. What were the differences? Were you able to discern any differences? Because at the beginning, I was not. Some years ago, these calligraphies were invented back late 2012, 2013. And the first book with them in it came out in 2013, the Soul Over Matter. No, it's 14. Anyway, calligraphy has the power to carry Tao. Sound resonates. The type of sound, there's a difference between a cello and a violin. You know that. There's a difference between how we chant. One of the things that surprised me so much, my mentor used to pass on his teacher, Dr. and Master Shah, his teaching, which was chant out loud some of the time, chant silently some of the time. It's yin and yang. Well, I didn't understand that much about yin and yang, and I didn't feel anything when I was chanting silently. That was about 15 years ago or so, probably. So for you, I invite you now to remember if you, when I was changing the projection method, if you went inside and asked to recall 2 relationships, and I would like to give you the opportunity to transform one of them right now. And you get to choose which one or none, because this has to be a safe container. So if you would like to do this, I hope you can see the Tao calligraphy now. Would someone unmute and say yes or no?
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah. So first of all, we want to say hello. We want to speak to the Shen Qi Jing, the soul, consciousness, receiver aspect, heart, energy. Did you know that things like a rock actually vibrates? I loved science when I was a kid, and I just didn't believe a lot of it. What do you mean a rock vibrates? Only if I throw it against a wall. Well, no. So this card actually vibrates. This one, all of these Tao calligraphy cards, vibrates at levels that science may not be able to perceive. Not being a scientist, I'm not going to wager an opinion. But I would like for you to just wonder. A card vibrates? Okay, let's just stick with sound vibrates. So I invite you to hold one person. I'm suddenly aware of one person myself. And let's ask this card. Dr. Master Shaw's Say Hello greeting goes something like this. Dear, the soul, heart, mind, and body of this Tao calligraphy card, I love you. You have the power to transform this relationship if you have chosen one. Now, if we were talking to ourselves, sending what's called a soul order, we would say, do a good job. Thank you. But since we're talking to something that's literally cosmic, I don't ever do that. I go, could you please transform this relationship? Thank you so much. And then all we have to do is gaze at the card or close your eyes and feel the field of greatest love and chant. The chanting is going to me, it's something like the difference between scraping with a putty knife and sometimes using a hammer and a chisel or a jackhammer. So let's start with one of those wonderful kitchen spatulas that can handle heat up to 400 degrees. Die, 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 die. Die, 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 die. And then we might want to get a wooden spatula. Die, die. die, die. So I've been making scrambled eggs and I burned something. I didn't have enough oil on the pan. I got to really work to get it off. Die, 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 die. Scrape, scrape. Die, 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 die. That's really not an accurate example, though, because greatest love melts all blockages. Not only scraping burned egg off a pan, but not scraping, melting it off. Like holding an ice cube in your hand and putting it under some medium warm water at the sink, running out of the faucet. And it just, the ice cube just shrinks. So imagine now, use your mind and imagine that in the center of your heart chakra, your being, there's this ice cube, it might be dark colored because of the relationship with this one person that you want to transform. And we're in a field of warm golden light. And that resistant area begins to melt and turn golden. Die, 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 die. And there's also very tiny aspects of this field that we want to transform. And so let's chant or sing or think silently. Greatest love, die. If you'd like to, you can increase the power of this by using your fingers to trace the calligraphy. If you're not familiar with it or need a reminder, would like a reminder, it goes up like this and down, back up and over. And then there's that connecting rod. And then shoo, down the slide. And down again and up and over. This part right here looks like a infinity symbol, kind of. That's heart. And then almost the last swoop down and up. Here's the second to the last swoop down and then down. And this little gizmo, it moves slightly down there at the bottom. That's a beauty mark. So when we trace, we increase the power 10, 20 times. Imagine instead of chanting for an hour, looking at the calligraphy, or without, we then start tracing and we have the same effect in 10 minutes as with chanting Da'ai for an hour. When that was shared years back, I had so much hope because I knew I had a whole lot of stuff to transform. And this just cut it down by 90%. It gets even better. As many of you know. Da. So now I invite you, instead of being silent, to stay muted, but chant along with me so that our chantings meld, and we'll multiply the difference between one of us chanting by ourselves and a group that's the square of the number of us. If there's 10 of us here, it'd be like 100 people chanting. Are you ready? Da 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 So we'll pause this until the next time you revisit it, but let's say thank you. So, dear, this greatest love, calligraphy, I am so grateful for the gathering and the chanting and the transformation. And now I invite you to wonder on a scale of 1 to 10, before we started, how uncomfortable was this memory that came up? I'm feeling somebody saying, that was not even a 1, but somebody else is going, maybe for yours, but mine was a 6. My own, not sure. I wasn't paying much attention to it. You may not have either, so that's okay. You get a do-over. You'll get a recording. Yeah. And now I'd like you to reflect on now, on a scale of 1 to 10, what is your level of discomfort thinking about that relationship? Whatever it was at the first, what is it now? Sometimes it doesn't change. And one time somebody said, it's worse. Like, why'd you mess with this? It's sometimes comes more into our awareness. And so what we thought was a 3 really was a 6. And we became aware of that. That's an invaluable awareness. Yeah. Okay, so let's move to another thought. You've just experienced more knowing yourself. And I invite you to wonder, what do you feel about, or what do you feel most often? And what do you believe about yourself, especially about how you feel? And you might make a list of where you are hard on yourself. Because now you know, if you can change an outside relationship, it's not outside, it's inside. So we can change where we're hard on ourselves. We just say, dear the Tao Calligraphy, help me not be so hard on myself. Thank you. It's important for us to have a wider perspective or a wider lens in this, because we're living systems. We're shaped by what? Our experiences. We're always changing. We just don't realize it. And we all have inner children. I've got dozens of them, but less than there used to be. Some of them have grown up and are helping manage the younger ones. So really amazing if you were in my mind. So the inner child, that child learned to survive in the only way that it knew how to do at that time. And for many, it was not pleasant. Mine wasn't. A lot of people have shared that theirs was not either. The good news is we can offer those childhood memories that are still in us, we can offer them safety. So forgiveness, because that's what we're doing. Forgiveness begins gently. We start externally, and at some point we're able to look internally. Patterns that we have to forgive ourselves. We learned them, and that was all we were able to do. And we can release the blaming. That was really hard for me. I wanted to blame everybody in the world for anything that was going wrong around me. So we learned patterns. We can release the blaming out exterior because I didn't want to blame myself. And we can allow these new awarenesses to ground. It takes repetition. So you're going to have a recording and you could go back through it again. And you can control how fast you move. You can use that calligraphy for an hour. Yeah. So back to external relationships. Self-love creates authentic relationships, not overnight. Everything transforms, not everything, but the really deep stuff transforms slowly. So authenticity begins inside and not with a leap and a bound, usually. Our boundaries will become clearer. We'll learn what boundaries mean. And in areas, well, I've had yeah, boundaries in areas I didn't know the worst, anything like that. And I've grown. And love began to flow more naturally. And the last several years, things just happen. I'm doing them. I see myself. Other people see me. I'm saying things, but it's not conscious. It's just love flows after a certain point. Hopefully, it'll happen for you sooner than it did for me, because these tools were not around when I was your age. So I want to thank you. You wouldn't be here if you had not chosen love, choosing, yeah. So I'm very grateful for that. I'm grateful that you're here. Yeah. So thank you for coming tonight or this morning, whatever time it is in your part of the world. I never know. I know it's must be midnight for Zahir. Yeah. So if you have any questions, it's 1 minute to 7. And ideally, we want to keep these to an hour. So I will ask Holly to stop the recording, and then we'll open it up and have any kind of a discussion you'd like, because I put myself to bed when I'm ready. And as long as you have questions, we can stick around.